Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. I'm honored to be joined by Patrick Holland, who is the leader of the Missouri Freedom Initiative. And he has been working with legislatures across the nation, and including Missouri, which has kind of become ground zero for a lot of the sound money initiatives out there with gold and silver. And we want to get an update from Patrick on what's going on in Missouri as well as other states, and what has happened so far and how this all started as well.
Hi there, Sal. Thank you so much for having you on your show, man. This is awesome. Nice to be with you on Salivate Metal. This is awesome.
Yes, indeed. So tell us how this started.
I'm going to tell you, to the best of my knowledge, that there was basically a movement that had started more than a year ago because of the threat of the digital dollar and because inflation. There was an outline on how to create a bill to turn silver and gold into money in a state that was circulating around. And Bill Eigel, he's a senator in the state of Missouri, is quite possibly the very first person to take advantage of that and actually create a bill. And it has passed the Senate and in 2023. And we're sitting and we're waiting for it to be, basically acknowledged in the House and put into a committee. But that's kind of the etymology of it. And that's why a lot of these bills seem to have a lot of similar language. I think they all came from an original outline maybe that was circulating around. And so that's what I understand anyway. So now that Missouri has this, what's really interesting about this, Al, is that 14 other states have somewhat similar legislation to begin the process to turn silver and gold into legal tender in their states. The latest one to join is Kansas, but a little birdie told me recently that Idaho is going to join the list here in the next week or so.
It's been amazing to see. I've watched some of the footage from some of these legislative sessions. And I know Wyoming, there's some footage out there of that as well, too. I haven't seen it yet, but it's just amazing to see some of these states where this legislation has gone through and it actually becomes law. And then once it becomes law, especially with like depositories and also, investing in gold and silver and being able to make that, how does it get actually enforced or enacted?
That's a very good question, actually, and it's somewhat complex, but I'm going to break it down for you a little bit based on the framework you provided me. Number one is the main driver of what seems to be the bills that are happening all across the nation, we'll talk about Wyoming in a second, is just getting government out of the way. Just literally government acknowledge gold and silver as legal tender as the U.S. Constitution says it is, and then just get out of the way. Now, you can have a depository for the state. That's something that, they can do for themselves. There are free market solutions out there, and those will just be allowed to operate under the new, guidelines set up by just getting the state out of the way. One of them I talk about from time to time is UPMA Bank associated with Utah. So it's easy to talk about that, but let me get back to Wyoming here now. Wyoming already had legal tender law for gold and silver. What they didn't have was a depository. So based on, basically the outline, the depository has always been a part of this in one way, shape, or form, whether it's the state doing it. And by the way, the regulations for a state having depository have very little effect on people. It's basically for the state to hold a certain amount of their reserves in gold and silver. That's the main purpose of the depository. It's not to create a bank for the people. And so that's where the private market comes in with, like UPMA Bank that Utah has. Now, once again, I'm talking about other states, but Missouri's bill basically leaves it wide open for the treasurer on how they want to be custodian of at least 1% of states' reserves. So Wyoming is finishing up what Missouri's attempting to do in one foul swoop, because Wyoming's been doing it in parts over the years. Utah, by the way, gets credit because they did this way before the rest of us back in 2011. They are way ahead of the curve. And Missouri is a show-me state. We should have been the first to do it, but we're not. But, at least we're in the fray this year. That's the etymology of actually doing a depository, is actually safeguarding some of the state's funds from inflation or a digital dollar. Missouri's bill has something that no one else has, though, and that's very special, and it's an amendment that was included on the Missouri bill while it was going through the Senate, and that is that the state cannot mandate a digital currency. In other words, if the Federal Reserve comes out with a central bank digital currency, as Executive Order 14067 commands it to do, then the state of Missouri says in there that the state itself, all state agencies, everything from going to the Department of Motor Vehicles to paying your taxes to the Treasury, they cannot mandate that you pay them in digital dollars. That's a really cool thing. It's the very first piece of legislation we have seen state or in any state right now that actually protects the residents of the state against digital currency. So, but at any rate, that's what Wyoming is doing right now. I hope Wyoming is watching Missouri's bill so they can protect the folks in Wyoming from a digital currency as well.
I think that is amazing and excellent news, because really it is about protection against what we're seeing with these central bank digital currencies, but also just in terms of inflation and other factors. And, we talk about central banks, and usually when we hear that term, it's in a negative context. But these central banks are holding a lot of gold around the world. And the United States has over 8,100 tons of it. At least that's what most of us believe.
They say.
That's what they say. But essentially, what you're talking about is very well could be central banks for these states.
That's correct. Yeah, it's basically setting up a bank in your state. That is correct, with real value backing it up, intrinsic value backing up your state pension fund per se. That's a really good example. I don't want to go much further than that because that gets into real big speculation land, but inflation's real, folks. I mean, we're all seeing it. The states realize this too. Digital currency is a threat, and states see that too. What you're seeing is states fighting back from a federal government overreach is what's happening. I'm almost sure of it. This is too big of a movement to be anything but that.
And it makes it, completely legal and encourages the use of silver and gold for transactions. There's multiple ways to do it. You could use bullion, silver coins, gold coins even, or something like the gold back, which Utah was first to have the gold back to be used for transactions. But I think that's great. Anybody that wants to freely exchange with gold and silver can do so in those states. Is there anything preventing people from doing that in states that have not enacted these policies yet under Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution?
Correct, but not all states have legal tender law for gold and silver. That's the difference. The legal tender thing is critical. Is absolutely critical for you to be able for businesses to feel comfortable taking gold and silver as a form of payment for their goods or services. I mean, it really kind of starts there, along with the state recognizing it by literally accepting gold and silver in payment of taxes if the taxpayer so chooses to do. This is a great thing about all these bills. They're all volunteerist bills. No one's being forced to use gold and silver. It's a choice, as it should be. No, I haven't seen a single bill that says we don't want the dollar in our state anymore. No, they're not doing that either. They're just giving you more options is what they're giving you. But the nice thing is about giving you an option with gold and silver is, number one, it's constitutional. And number two, it deals better with inflation than the dollar does. So that's a really cool thing, too.
And in that answer, you pretty much had addressed another question I had, and that would be the type of silver or gold. I guess it's by weight. So it could be a 1 ounce Britannia. And, it has a different nation's denomination, a different currency, but still it's about the weight of the metal that they could take it in if they feel that it's trustworthy. Yes.
Yep. For the original bill that was filed in Missouri, that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, because that brought something very important to light here. How are states going to, address the value? There was a substitute offered where it's spot price plus market premium. So we're acknowledging the free market in that. And basically the free market is basically the way gold and silver community deals with the manipulation of gold and silver by the federal government. So that's already addressed in ours, but also too, weight and purity. So that's also in the Missouri bill. So if your state is doing something with gold and silver, look at Missouri's language. It's real easy to find. It's senate.mo.gov, and then just go to legislation, and then look at 2023 legislation and look for SB 100. Nice round number. That's our bill here in the state of Missouri. It's been perfected in the Missouri Senate. So it's already gone through a legislative body of very smart people. So, basically we have really good language is what I mean. So if your state's going through this process, Hopefully your legislators are looking at our bill and corrections to small errors that we had from our original filing.
Great. So where does it stand? You say it's gone through the Senate. It's in. Has it gone through the House?
It's in the House right now, but it's not been assigned a committee. So that part is what we expect to happen next. And we expect that to happen probably within about 2 weeks. And then basically once it gets into committee, custodianship of that bill goes to Representative Dirk Deaton in Missouri. And he will be the bill handler for that Senate bill in the House. So that's already been determined. And but I'm glad you asked that question too, because I want to talk about one more thing. Our organization, the Missouri Freedom Initiative, we're big cheerleaders and in a way chaperones for this bill. We stepped out right in the very beginning of this bill being filed and literally told everyone we are supporting this bill. But the important part, and this is critical, Sal, the important part is if you have a bill like this in your state, you have to support it. And just saying that you like the bill is not enough. Phone calls, emails, visits to your capital. Those are critical to get liberty legislation through. Liberty legislation is really hard to get passed in some states. So you must support the bill by action, not just by, saying you support it. Critical stuff. And in fact, in March 7th, we have a big event up at the Missouri Capitol, which we call Knock and Shock. We're going to get as many people up there as possible to go knock on doors and hand out flyers and talk to these representatives and explain to them why we need this bill in Missouri. I suggest other states do the same thing. We call it Knock and Shock because we've been doing this for years and we have a name for it, and it's borrowed from shock and awe, if you remember that from the military. So because we're there in such large numbers, it's very shocking to see such large groups going around who have literally, we're not getting paid. No one gets paid. No one gets their gas money reimbursed. Everyone has to pay for their own lunch. These are real, honest to God citizens that are making a difference in the state of Missouri. That's what our organization does. And then the operation, as I said, is called Knock and Shock. And that'll be in the House, the Missouri House, March 7th. If you're in Missouri, please come by the Capitol March 7th and get on our email list on our website, mofree.org, to get further details of how you can get involved in turning gold and silver into legal tender in the state of Missouri. And we also want to let you know if you're in another state that doesn't have this legislation, also contact me. I can help you get that legislation in your state. Do it quick because a lot of states' deadlines for filing dates are coming up quick. Just email me, patrick@mofree.org, and I'll outline for you basically what you need to do to help get this legislation in your state. Guys, this is huge. This is a massive deal.
And I'll put his email address in the description of this video so you can contact him easily. And so that's where it stands in Missouri. How about where things stand in the other states? You mentioned Wyoming earlier.
Yes. Mississippi is the big one right now in the news. They've gone through the House and the Senate on 2 of their bills. Mississippi is a great state example of where they're doing it all in one fell swoop at the same time as well. Salute to all of you in Mississippi. What they're doing is they have to get rid of sales tax on gold and silver as well. So they have to do that step first to get to the legal tender process. But they got all these bills coming after it that take care of legal tender, non-confiscation, depository. All the other bills are coming up right behind it. So they're getting it done too. I mean, like I said, hats off to all of you in Mississippi. Support your bill, Mississippi. Don't let any of those bills fall through the cracks. There's a bunch of them. So that's the big one that I can think of right now, Sal. That is constantly hitting the news because they just have so many of these bills that regard, silver and gold as legal tender, and they're having to get them through separately. There's like 4 of them, I think.
All right, great. So now we've just wrapped up on where things stand now with this initiative. And what are you looking at for the future? What's coming ahead? Let's talk about, within this year and maybe even for the next 5 years.
Okay, gotcha. I'll tell you what is in the future is a free market. I mean, that's the end result of this, isn't it? When you have banks like UPMA and Gold Money and others that basically, start stepping in and people have an option to get away from, Federal Reserve controlled banks. you start getting into free markets with banking. So that can probably change things for the better, because the federal government, basically is causing this inflation by spending so much money in the first place. So I think this is a good move. So were we in a year? I'm hoping in a year, this is my hope, that we have at least 10 states with legal tender law for gold and silver. That'll be a mind-blowing, first off. I mean, when you think about it, it's been a long time since gold and silver were money. 1964, was when Johnson took us off the silver standard. 1971, we were taken off the gold standard by Nixon. It's a new way of thinking, a deflationary currency, a currency that can go up in value while you're sleeping and have more value when you wake up the next day. That's a really cool thing. So in 1 year, I see, maybe 10 states. In 5 years, I see almost all states actually having silver and gold as money again. And why that's important is because we're addressing issues that regard the federal government's overreach as maybe a tad too much, and that we need a certain way to get out of it, especially when it comes to digital dollars. ESG, environmental social governance. We have, the possibility of social credit scoring coming down the pike with the digital dollar and the digital wallet. Total, complete totalitarian control of people's lives, individual sovereign people's lives. There will be no sovereign lives anymore, any more sovereign people anymore with the digital currency.
You're already seeing ESG infiltrate big corporations, the mining sector, banking, all of it. It's already here. It's just that it's going to be in overdrive when the central bank digital currencies come.
Oh yeah. In fact, if you're watching Biden's spending initiatives right now for infrastructure, ESG is built right in. It's really, really terrifying, gang. They are depending on a digital dollar to come out for what they have planned and what they're implementing right now as we speak with the infrastructure spending. Everything they're doing right now is based on the digital dollar is definitely coming. If you want away from that kind of government overreach, you might want to consider getting legislation like this in your state so you have another option, so you can get out of that, and make sure that your state puts in its legislation that the state cannot mandate a digital currency for payment of taxes, because that's how they'll get you. A brilliant addition to Missouri's bill. Hats off to Senator Rick Bratton, who actually added that to the bill in Missouri. No one thought of that before. That was a brilliant addition.
Well, this is wonderful. This is great. I think it's a tall order for the next 5 years to try to get it in all 50 states. However, I will say that, especially some of these more progressive states that are more fall in line, and especially when they get money from the federal government. My fear is that the feds may, try to hold them hostage with some of this legislation that's coming through, because they see it as a threat that they can't control these states as well either.
That's right.
Like you won't get funding. So I think it means that it's going to take you, the citizen. I have a lot of viewers in California, for instance. You folks are so important to contact your legislatures, even down to the local government level. Let them know that this is something that you want, because it is about sound money. Gold and silver, they withstand the test of time. They surpass generations, epochs, nation states, cultures, and religions. They've survived it all.
I agree. I feel bad for the folks in California because, honest to God, it just seems like California is controlled by China in many ways. And I know that they own the ports and they own a lot of farmland out there, a lot of real estate, a lot of businesses out there and everything. It's really too bad. But at any rate,
by the way, China already has a CBDC.
Yes, they do. And
they already are using social credit scoring.
Correct. And I'm not sure about ESG, but you're right on the social credit scoring. There's lots of stories about that online. They talk about it in a positive way, of course. But if you don't like what your government is doing, and if you're vocal about it, say goodbye to accessing the quote unquote digital money in your digital wallet, because they'll make sure that you get in line real quick. Otherwise, you can't make your house payment. You get in line quick, or you can't drive your car down the street. They'll do all kinds of
action in Canada.
Yep. So this is, a pretty big movement. And actually, I don't like to call it a movement. This is a revolution, Sal. Well, wouldn't you agree?
I would agree.
So this is the states, deciding the federal government has gone just a little bit too far and we need to reel our rights back in. Using gold and silver as money is exactly what the founding fathers said for us to do in the Constitution. The fiat currency existed back then. Paper money existed back then. But when they had written the Constitution, they said, no, exactly, it's gold and silver. How many grains of gold, how many grains of silver equal $1? So they were familiar with, fiat currency and the ability to overprint it.
Because the Continental Congress utilized it, and that script was counterfeited by the British, and They saw exactly what happened there, and they did fix it in the Constitution. We've just ignored it after all these years. But you're right. Well, this is great. I mean, an amazing thing, and Mr. Holland, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us exactly what's going on here. And this is a revolution of sound money, and it's not just about individual rights, by the way. This is, well, I mean, the fundamental aspects of what the Constitution is about the individual rights, but it's something a lot of people miss out on, and that is state rights, states' rights. This is a combination of both of those.
It is.
And with both of those are respected and understood, because there's a reason why this country is called the USA, United States of America, because we are individual states. In fact, the Treaty of Paris in 1783 recognized 13 essentially individual states.
Individual countries almost,
individual
really.
Countries, right, exactly.
Sovereign.
Nation state, sovereign. And so that's what it's about. So this is why this is such a great thing, among many other things. And most of my viewers are silver and gold enthusiasts, stackers, if you will. And this is a wonderful thing. I've been talking about this on my channel for a while with some of the videos I've done, the latest one being about Mississippi. So thank you so much, Mr. Holland, for this. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
Yes, I do. I'd like to reiterate one more time, guys, liberty legislation like this does not happen on its own. Trust me, I've been involved in politics for many, many years, and I'm not a politician. I'm a citizen activist. You have to get involved. Make your phone calls to your senators, your representatives, if you have this legislation in your state. Call them, email them, make sure you tell them why you want this legislation. It's not enough to say, please vote yes on this. Please give them a reason. That's a very important thing when you're an activist. If you don't have this legislation in your state and you'd like to see it in your state, contact me at patrick@mofree.org, and I'll do what I can to help you get that legislation in your state by working through your legislators. This is a very, very important piece of legislation. In fact, arguably, maybe the most important legislation we've seen in our lifetimes, and I've lived a long time. So take it seriously and support it, not just by thought, but by deed.
Wonderfully said. Could not have said it better myself. Thank you, Mr. Holland, and thank you to every one of you for taking the time to watch this video. I will post a link in the description below to Mr. Holland's email address. We can reach out to him. And I want to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.